along highway, roll on along. Roll on 18-wheeler, roll on. Nearly 60 years ago, I read the bumper sticker on my Uncle Jim's white convertible, probably the first bumper sticker I ever saw. And it read, "America's needs move by truck." America's needs move by truck. I remember those words when I'm driving down narrow highways like 52 or 79, sharing the road with 18-wheelers that are transporting our clothes, the groceries we'll shop for today, our latest electronic gadget, our vehicles, the fuel for our vehicles, raw materials, corn, sunflowers. Look around us here today. An over-the-road truck driver brought everything we see, use, and consume today. 10-4, good buddy? 10-4. Let's hear it.
10-4.
For Jim. Jim provided for his family as an over-the-road trucker. By his own estimation, during his career, he drove 6 million miles, the equivalent of to the moon and back a number of times. So I did the math. It's 238,900 miles from the Earth to the moon. So he made at least 12 and a half round trips to the moon. By contrast, it's only 1,317 miles from Denver to Seattle. Other cities on Jim's runs were Portland, Bozeman, Billings, Phoenix, Boise and Pocatello, Salt Lake City, parts of California and Arkansas. He hauled everything from motorcycles to Jim Beam. He even hauled light fixtures into New York City. In 2000, Jim was recognized with a high honor when the Colorado Motor Carrier Association named him Mileage Driver of the Month and then Driver of the Year. Today's truckers are using technology such as the Truck and Travel app, dynamic routing, in-cab cameras, and they have GPS transponders. Jim, however, carried all this information in his brain. When son-in-law Tom was out delivering bulls or visiting customers, and it was getting late in the day, or maybe the weather was getting sketchy, Tom would call Jim for advice on going that extra mile or where to stay for the night. Jim would tell Tom exactly where to go because he knew all the highways and byways, the safest roads, or an alternate route. Last month, I asked Jim, what part of the country did you find the most beautiful when you were trucking? He looked off into the distance as the memories of images through his truck's windshield were going through his mind. You know, me and this old buddy of mine were talking about that one time. We were really fortunate to see it all. The East Coast in the fall, the heartland, the desert, the mountains, trees, the Northwest, the oceans. He looked back at me. It's all pretty, all of it. That tells you something about the heart of this big, tall man. He definitely loved the United States of America. Old Glory flew in his front yard every day. James Charles Root was born August 1st, 1937, in Springfield, Colorado, to Clarence and Margaret Root. He attended school in Walsh, Colorado, and graduated in 1955. As a youngster, he was fascinated by anything with wheels and was constantly building things. His sister, Joanne, remembers when she was 6 and Jim was 4. She had an appointment to get her tonsils out. The doctor took a look at Jim and said, "We'll take his tonsils out too." Jim protested, that he had eaten breakfast while Joanne couldn't, so he would not be able to have the surgery. The doctor told him, "You'll be fine." At that point, young Jim took matters into his own hands and made a run for it. His escape was thwarted, the tonsils came out, and he was fine. In fact, he started growing and growing. By high school, he was a head taller than the next tallest player on his team. Joanne also shared that when Jim was in junior high, he and his buddy would hang out at the local airport and go up in small planes with Roy the mechanic whenever he would give them the chance. And there may have been a time or two when Roy probably shouldn't have taken them. Joanne wonders about Jim's discomfort flying as an adult, and maybe it was related to a few of those flights with Roy. After graduation, he went into the Army and was eventually assigned to the Pentagon Motor Pool. More wheels. A perfect fit. During this stint, he chauffeured a general from Liberal, Kansas, who would ask for Jim as his driver each time he was in DC. He also met Jimmy Stewart and chauffeured the Colorado Cherry Blossom Princess in the Cherry Blossom Parade 2 years in a row. As a teenager, Jim began driving the big rigs for T.L. Tucker. During his career, he drove for Keen Lighting, Western Distributing, and Northwest Transports, from which he retired. Hearing the call of the road, Jim decided to come back out of retirement and drove for Gates Rubber Company. His CB handle was Kathy's Clown, from the Everly Brothers song. A large part of Jim's identity was piloting 18-wheelers. However, he was much more. Roll on, family. Roll on, crew. Roll on, mama, like I ask you to do. During his travels, Jim met a lovely young lady, Kathy Renner, and they were married in Bennett, Colorado on September 16, 1962. They lived in Aurora early in their marriage and welcomed 2 children, son James Dean, called JD, on June 24, 1963, and daughter Sherry Lynn on November 10, 1965. Jim and Kathy then built their home in the country along the Kiowa Creek, where they raised their children. The family loved animals, and there were horses, lots of dogs, and Barney the burro. They were active in 4-H, FFA, FBLA, and many school and community activities. Early on, Jim had 5-day runs with 2-day trips later in his career. While he was on the road, Kathy kept the home fires burning, and their kids pitched in. Sherry remembers a blizzard with winds so strong, the picture window blew in. Kathy and JD wrangled a piece of plywood into its place. When the electricity would go out, Kathy would get a fire going in the fireplace. They would roast hot dogs and go to bed with the chickens. Son JD passed away on February 28, 1983. This was life-shattering. Jim, Kathy, and Sherry dug down deep into their faith in God. As time went by, they learned that God would give them the courage and trust they needed to get through each day, even though their hearts were broken. Sherry would go on to graduate from CSU, meet and marry Tom Wolfe. Their family made their home in Lodi, California, and Jim and Kathy's granddaughters, Casey and Lexi, were born there. During these years, Jim and Kathy made several trips to California. They were also pursuing their passion for driving draft horses. The horsepower had changed for Jim, but it was still big. At 6'6", he was a good match for the big horses. He and Kathy were largely self-taught. Kathy would refer to the driving instruction book and communicate the plan to Jim, as they figured out a myriad of straps and buckles. "We had some magnificent wrecks," he told me with a laugh. Their last team was a hitch of Clydesdales, Farley and Gordy. They also had 3 miniature horses, each cuter than a button. They restored an old doctor's buggy and had a nice collection of other carts and buggies. Jim pointed out to me recently that the doctor's buggy had received new wheels during the restoration to give a better ride. "I'll show you the originals. They were just beautiful." Still a wheelman at age 82. One of their greatest joys was driving their draft horses in parades and weddings. They had also moved north of Bennett, creating a lovely home and property where they could see the mountains and horses grazing west of the house. They enjoyed the Draft Horse Club and meeting up with their buddies at events, including the National Western Stock Show, where they competed one year. Jim and Kathy squeezed in a few tours with the Western Livestock Journal, a trip to the National Rodeo Finals in Las Vegas, and a special trip with Sherry to Oklahoma City for a great niece's wedding, visiting with family, and got a kick out of the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum. They also went on some train rides, as Jim had a passion for steam trains in particular. About 12 years ago, Kathy sustained serious injuries in a fall from one of the Clydesdales. She endured many surgeries, and Jim spent weeks with her during surgeries and recoveries. They attended granddaughter Casey's wedding to Charles Pera in California, where Jim proudly escorted Kathy as they both walked to their places. This was a goal of theirs: no walker or wheelchair for Kathy. Jim was gifted with a tremendous memory and could recount wonderful stories reaching back into his childhood. Sherry described her dad as sweet, tender, and thoughtful. He always made time to visit with people and beamed when talking about the kids, Sherry and Tom, their children, and now his great-grandchildren. He often called Sherry Cher Bear, his nickname for her. Jim had a good sense of humor and was always ready with a comment or a quote. Granddaughter Lexi had held long conversations with her grandpa on topics ranging from linguistics, how to operate an iPhone, and she reports he was a good student, to the distinct personality of 2 project calves that she had. Buddy the bull calf that had broken a leg, and Lexi was nursing him back to health. Seems that Buddy would receive generous amounts of grain, while the other calf, Lass, the breeding heifer, only got a taste. And this breeding heifer was angered by the unfairness of it all and took it out on Lexi. On March 22nd, 2018, Kathy was called home to heaven. Jim bravely soldiered on. We talked several times on the phone, and he would be moved to tears as he recounted a kindness that someone had done for him. Sherry called him every day, and last year the remaining horses moved to Tom and Sherry's ranch in Montana. Sherry has a picture of Jim reuniting with Gordy. The big horse had dropped his head down into Jim's hands, and Jim was smiling as big as all outdoors. He was proud that Sherry was learning how to drive. No parades yet, he told me. More miles on the back roads first. Dad told me that. In later years, Jim enjoyed reading the newspaper thoroughly. He was a fan of fence post columnists Baxter Black and Lee Pitts, and he watched everything on RFD TV, with his favorite shows being Larry's Country Diner and Gentle Giants. He and Kathy were country through and through. In the past year, he kept up with Facebook family and friends on Kathy's Facebook page while browsing for new tractors on Facebook Marketplace. Fella can dream. He was blessed to see his great-grandchildren, Luca, who shares a love for steam trains with his Papa Jim, and beautiful little Esme, who was born October 1st. He was looking forward to meeting her in person at Thanksgiving, having admired many pictures of her. Jim was a member of Mountain View Fellowship of Strasburg, Colorado, the Teamsters Union, and the Colorado Draft Horse Association. Roll on, Daddy, till you get back home. Jim went to his heavenly home on Wednesday, November 6, 2019, in Bennett, Colorado. Sherry, Tom, Lexi, Casey, Charles, and children, thank you all from the bottom of their hearts for your friendship to Jim, for your presence here today, and for those who were with him when he passed. God bless you all.